Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Good morning, Glenn. How you doing?
Mikey, what's up, brother? How you doing, Chief?
Doing good. Doing good. For all things considered, living the dream, as I like to say.
I'm not. My cup of coffee's been sitting here a couple minutes and it's starting to get a little cold. I need a refresh.
Well, we'll call the barista over.
I know. I wonder how Brian's doing.
Do you remember gas stations used to have service guys? Like, they come out and fill your gas for you, clean the windows?
I am old enough to remember that, Mike.
Yeah, so certainly we can
Long
get somebody
time
to
ago.
bring us a coffee.
I know. That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's going on? What are we tackling today?
Yeah, hey, guess what? We got a table for three today.
Oh, man, I love table for threes. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually a little more super excited. We're going to cut down on the intros, and later on we'll make everybody go back to the website and find out all our emails and
all the resource
social
room and
media
all that.
contacts, all that kind of stuff, because I want to get right into it today. I'm so excited to have
Look
our
at you,
guest
Mr.
today.
Focus today.
I
Look at you.
know. Well, that's because I didn't sleep for the last week because I read a page-turning book, and it would,
Nice.
and it didn't take a break. It wasn't like after chapter 3, okay, let's take a little breakdown. No, they just went right into the next thing, and I'm like, oh man, you're killing me. So some sleepless nights, but I ran out of ink in my pen with a lot of underlines. So yeah,
that's awesome.
we've got another in our author series. Today we are joined by Veronica Valli, and we are so super excited to have Veronica with us. She is the author of Soberful, Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol. Veronica, welcome.
Hey, welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you two.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being here today. As I said, I read the book. Unfortunately, and maybe we can, we'll talk to our studio guy here. Maybe we can expand this to a 10-hour interview, right? But we're going to try and cram in
Hey,
a
Mike,
lot.
Mikey, why don't you just read the book out loud?
Yeah, right. There you go. An audio
We'll just
version.
do an audio book. Yeah,
It's on
That's right.
Audible, so I'm reading it on Audible.
Oh, that's
excellent.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So, yeah, just a great read. But before we kick off, there's so many different elements of the relationship with Veronica I'd like to bring to the table because she did author this book that we're going to talk about today. Also has, I signed up for the email months ago, and I get inspirational messaging, pointed to direction of just a better way to live. And so great social media presence, a podcast that she hosts with Chip, I think, and good stuff there. So she's a brand. She's not just brawn. She's a brand.
Not just a book, huh?
Not just a book. She's so much deeper than that. And so
That's great.
Anyway, Veronica, I'm gonna steal some thunder. I'm gonna say my first thing first, and then I'm gonna shut up and let our listeners hear from you. But I found the greatest gem in the back of the book. It was just in the closing pages, and it says, and I quote, "This book was never about trying to persuade you to stop drinking. It was about facilitating your awakening to what is possible if you change your relationship with alcohol and introduce simple practices to make sobriety sustainable for you." That summarized my experience with the book, and I'm so glad you wrote that sentence in there because that was it. So is that why you wrote the book?
Yeah, thank you. We can't persuade people to stop drinking, and we can't tell them that alcohol is bad for them. I think this sober curious kind of movement is gonna peak soon. Like, I think it's really, like, I mean, kind of really break into the public's consciousness on a much bigger level. And we know, like, I'm assuming you got into sobriety the same way that I did, in that there was just no freaking other choice, you know, and it didn't feel like a very good choice back then. It felt like the worst choice ever. But then subsequently, we discover that it's completely opposite to everything that we think it is, that it's the doorway into this incredible life. And it's not just the not drinking, it's the personal development work that then summoned me, that I couldn't just not drink, it just wasn't enough, that it was the personal growth that I had to engage in, which again, didn't particularly want to, but so glad I did, because of the gifts that came from that.
Yeah, that's so. Again, I read that through the pages. I love the one analogy. Well, for two things. First of all, in my community, I deal with a lot of newcomers, a lot of people who are at a really dark and desperate place. And your book talks to people who are at a dark and desperate place, but more importantly, it talks to people before they get to that dark and desperate place, right? Because it talks about the con that the alcohol companies are selling us, the vision that isn't real, it isn't based in reality, and the book points you to lifestyle changes, self-awareness, all those great things, and sits on 5 principles or pillars, and allowed me to say, wow, there's hope for somebody who doesn't have to get to where maybe I got to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the big alcohol con, you know, I was talking to someone the other day about how drinking is in the UK and how it is in America, and I think abstinence from alcohol is a little bit more accepted in America than it is in the UK. People still look at you like you have 2 heads if you don't drink. I mean, they certainly did when I stopped drinking. I was 27, so that's relatively quite young. And I mean, it was back in, you know, the early 2000s. People just looked at you like you were mad. Like, why would you possibly do that? And all sobriety is, in my opinion, it's 2 things. We get sobriety by its consistency. It's consistently doing things that support our mental and emotional health, and that's what makes sobriety sustainable. And which leads to a shift in perception. We just see everything differently, and it's incredible the devotion to alcohol abuse, like the devotion to it. I mean, we've normalized abnormal drinking. I mean, that's the first thing. It's like so many people think their drinking is in the scope of being normal, but it's not. It's abnormal drinking, and just the devotion to it. And that's what I did, and I'm sure you did as well. Is I just thought I have to find a way to manage it. If I can just manage it, then I'll reap all the benefits that everyone in my culture, that our media that tells me that I'll get from it. And we only quit because we just can't figure out how to manage it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I love how you put that, with an international slant. But, I heard something recently that's really cool. I said, we wish sobriety was promoted as sexy as the big liquor companies promote drinking, But I think that's starting to come around. I'm seeing it more and more with the sober curious, and I love the work you're doing in that space, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. But where people that are in pain, right? Because I'm on your Facebook group and I see a lot of sober curious, but I also see a lot of pain, and that folks realize that there's a solution to that pain.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. What I see a lot is people keep doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
And I actually have a workshop.
Me.
Yeah. Well, it's about this consistency thing. If you're looking for the magic pill, that's what it is. And what people do is they focus on the goal of not drinking. And I think nearly everyone achieves that, whether it's for a day or 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months. Everybody can achieve it, even if it's just for a few hours. The problem isn't stopping, the problem is staying stopped. And if you just focus on the goal, like I just want to stop drinking, but you don't change anything else, you just continue to live your life the way you've lived it for the last few years, all that's going to do is get you what you've always got. So what I focus on and what my book is about is it's a strategy, it's a system, it's a program. We don't really focus so much on the not drinking, although that is obviously an important aspect. We focus on creating an internal change and creating an internal emotional change. And you're right, this isn't just a problem that's exclusive to people who abuse alcohol. You know, people are numbing their internal anguish in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah. And talk about inclusion. You know, I know that many a male partner of mine might say, okay, what does a female know about my drinking problem? I can tell you, having read the book, that it's inclusive. It speaks to men and women alike. And you know, part of what the book did for me was there's broken out. You call them journal prompts, I think, and they're little exercises to kind of bring you back to what's really happening, right? And I found that to be enlightening, because it's not a novel. It's a bit of a workbook, and it's one that I intend to go back and redo again, because I think each time I go through the exercise, I'm uncovering more about myself.
Yeah, and that's the feedback I've got from it, is that it's really useful for everybody, not just people with an alcohol problem. And I wanted to give people tools. That's a big thing of what I do in my work is, you know, when I first got sober, people would say things to me like, you know, you need to have boundaries with your mother. And I'd be like, first of all, I didn't even know what that was. And that I could have them with my mother blew my mind. But my next question was how? Specifically how? So I'm very big on giving people very specific tools, like specifically, how do you do that?
Right. And that rang true. And I think one of the things that I came to realize was that the pillars are just foundation blocks that you lay out in the book. They're foundation blocks, but you said something interesting a second ago, and that was the work that you do. And so I want to get back to the book, but because I'm going to recommend that everybody has the book as part of their toolkit. I mean, you know, give it a try, read it once. It'll take you a couple days, or in my case, a night or two. But read the book and have that in your toolkit. But you take this purpose to a whole new level. Tell us a little bit about what you do outside the book.
So, you know, when I got sober, I never knew what I wanted to do with my life ever. And I started training as an addictions therapist. Then I went back to I got sober in Key West in Florida. And then I went back to the UK and finished my training as a psychotherapist. And I worked in rehabs and I had a private practice there. And then when I married my husband, I married an American and moved back to America. I didn't really know what to do because my qualifications didn't transfer from the UK and I had children. And so I wrote a couple of books that I self-published that did really well. And then people would reach out to me and be like, can you help me? Like, I've read your book. It's exactly how I feel. And I was like, I don't know. So it was very organic. I started a blog. I kind of messed around with social media. And then I saw lots of other people offering coaching services who were not qualified in any way or experienced. They just saw the business opportunity. So I then launched myself as a coach, and that's really what I've done for the last few years is coaching, which actually suits me so much more than psychotherapy. I loved being a psychotherapist, and I still have those skills and that background. But coaching is much more, I don't know, it suits my personality. It's much more direct, and it's very much for me about skill building. It's about, I take people, one of the cornerstones that I think of sobriety, that is the transformational work. If you want to do the transformational work that will change things beyond anything you can imagine, it's the resentment work. So what I do in my with my clients is I do a model that's based on rational emotive behavioral therapy, which is it's similar but different to what the 12 steps do. The step 4. It's that transformational way of shifting your perception about something, and that for me was life changing for me, and I see it in the people that I work with as well. But it's a very specific skill.
So paint a picture of me of what it's like to have you as a coach. What does the process look like? I understand that some of your training is done digitally. How much is done face to face? What does the engagement look like?
Well, usually I do small coaching groups, and I have a couple of other facilitators. Chip, my podcast co-host, does some, and I have another coach, Tamara, that does some great work as well. But it's really, we do specific things. Like my mindset program is about all of that. It's a program for people really who've been in recovery and looking to go to the next level. I don't think people who come to me, they get a sense, like, I don't stay on the surface. I'm not a surface person. I go deep, and those are the people who are attracted to working with me, I think, because I've always said this as a therapist, like when I've worked with a therapist or coach, I can only work with someone who has gone to the bone, because I went to the bone. Like, I went to the deepest, darkest places because I had to get the changes that I wanted in my life. So my mindset program is, we do all of this different mindset work about our subconscious programming and our limiting beliefs and the words that we use, and how, childhood patterns and all of that kind of stuff. I teach boundaries in nearly every program I do, because just knowing, I used to be such a chronic people pleaser. I was so concerned about what you thought about me and whether you liked me or not. And I would burn up so much energy trying to get you to like me. And learning how to have boundaries is revolutionary. It will revolutionize your life and how you feel about yourself. And it just has such a massive effect. So I teach that in nearly every program I do. So I do lots of different things. I have, small coaching groups, and I have my subscription group, and I have teaching webinars and all of that kind of stuff.
I love that. I
love that.
Yeah.
Mike, we're going to the bone. We're getting down there, digging in the dirt.
Right? Well,
digging in the dirt.
The book uses a different word in several places, and it really resonated with me, and that is vulnerability, how important vulnerability is. And one of the things that you didn't write in the book but was speaking to me as I read about vulnerability is that I need to be vulnerable with myself too. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me reading the book. But vulnerability, and I think that's the beautiful thing of working with somebody else. You say it in your book, of course, to echo a million other people. You don't have to do this alone. And guess what? You're not alone, because you've got podcasts, and you've got support group meetings, probably locally, that you could plug into. You've got online coaching that you could plug into. You don't need to do this alone. And frankly, in my journey, I was alone. I was a loner, and I isolated. And so this concept of being vulnerable to somebody else was so foreign to me. But boy, once I learned it, it became just a weight off my shoulders, because I found out that my vulnerability attracted vulnerability, and together two broken people can heal better than anybody else.
Well, Mikey, you're absolutely right, and I completely identify with what you say. And what you're saying is, what your vulnerability attracted was realness, and it was the realness of the connection that fed you in a way that you didn't realize that you were. It's like, I never knew I needed that, but now I can't live without it. But that's what we're searching for. It's authenticity. I think that sobriety, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about trauma is the root of all addiction, and people often misunderstand that. So kids that have been traumatized in various different ways, not all of them grow up to be addicts, but every single one of them grows up to usually find some kind of dysfunctional coping mechanism until they can get help. So you can see how emotional and mental and sexual trauma can be at the root of addiction. You can just see how wanting to numb those feelings. But I have a lot of clients who say, I didn't experience any trauma. Like, my parents were pretty good. I had a pretty good childhood, all of that kind of stuff. So we have two primary human needs when we are infants. And one is for attachment, which we understand that children need attachment to their significant caregivers to develop emotionally, not just survive, but develop emotionally. But they also have the need for authenticity. And what often happens, and this is what happened with me, is I became aware that my real self was not acceptable in my family. So my family didn't do feelings. They found feelings very frightening, and they shut them down very quickly. So I couldn't express my authentic self. So I buried it. So this sobriety is the journey back to oneself. It is back to one's authentic self. And there's lots of different ways that, I think in our family of origin, our authentic selves are, and our parents don't realize we're doing it. I saw how I did this with my son. My son was about 3 or 4, and he was doing show and tell at pre-K. And he picked up, literally it was like a pit of plastic rubbish from some packaging. And he's like, I'm going to take this. And I was like, don't take that. And I was like, oh, Nan, his British grandmother had sent him this toy airplane. Take the British, you can talk about Nana and you could talk about, and he was like, no, I want to take, and I was getting more and more and then I had this minute of I am trying to impose my experience on him. He wants to, and I swear to God, every week he would pick the most bizarre thing for show and tell. And I just let him, because that was his authentic experience. So all these different ways our authentic experience gets chipped away at. And with, and that for me is the biggest cause of alcohol abuse and drug abuse, is this way that we chip away at our authentic selves so we don't recognize ourselves. And sobriety is the journey back to that. And it can only be found when vulnerability is there.
I can really relate to that.
Yeah. I in the early part of the book, you made a statement that said the more information you have and the more help you have, the easier the experience will be. And and that's, for me, the reading the book and the journal prompts gave me more information about myself. And just on a note, the trauma section really hit me because, and I'm sure that we all have our own story of whatever trauma might be. It was real for us. And it hit me so much that I went back to a person that is helping me. We call them sponsors in 12-step. And I said, I really need to redress this trauma because it has a residual impact on my actions today. And outside of drinking, I mean, it didn't cause me to drink yesterday, but it caused me to act different. And I really appreciated you touching that, that hot button.
Yeah, and we know so much more about that now. I mean, when I was first training and doing this stuff, we didn't even know as much as we do now. And it's just such a significant thing. And that, in the book, it's about the 5 pillars, and one of the pillars is process, and that's understanding how our past shows up in our present, and how our past has shaped and affected us, and how we can begin to shed this stuff, how we can begin to leave some of this stuff behind, or at least support ourselves through how it shows up. But I think trauma work is a really vital part of this process.
Yeah, and as you talk about that, talk about the trauma. I look back at my childhood, and I was one of the ones with just a loving family, no trauma. But as you talk about that, and one of the things that, as I've dug in the dirt, or as you say, get to the bone, I was adopted. And
that's a trauma. That's a trauma.
And I realized, and you talk about attachment. Now, I told myself, as I found out I was adopted from an early, as early as I could understand, and it was always a mind game to me. I always looked at it very positive and said, hey, these people wanted me, they loved me, they took me in, boy, they love, and I love being adopted. But at the end of the day, what it took me years, in fact, recently, to really fess up to, I was really hurt that somebody didn't want me. And then when you talk about, kind of reprogramming, I was working with somebody, they're like, how you're acting today and your recent past from drinking and all that, that's not really who you are. And she said, go back to who you were in third grade. Describe who you were in third grade. And I listed all these great attributes. And she goes, that's kind of your core that you can lean upon. And that really helped me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, trauma without adoption, without a doubt, is a trauma. It can't, and even if you ended up in a family like yours that just, that sounds like that was really the best outcome. You really lucked out there. There's still that we know a lot more about infant attachment, even from when babies are in the womb, and there is, there's no denying that. But I also think that it can be reconciled.
Good stuff.
It takes work.
So a couple of things I wanted to achieve. You use an analogy in the book, and it's the squares, right? It's the place we are right now, and we're on step one or square one, right? And so there's two things. First of all, I want to talk about that a little bit because we have a lot of listeners, a lot of people join us here in the coffee shop who they're early in the journey, and the whole I'm never going to drink for the rest of my life thing is overwhelming. It still is for me, at this point. It's like, but I can't think it through today. I'm where I am today. There's no better place, as you said in the book, to start than where you are right now. Talk to that person, Veronica, who's just starting out. Tell them what direction they might go for step two, square three.
So how I'd like to start that is, I think often when people are in that kind of dark place where we've been, where alcohol's no longer working, but the idea of not drinking again feels like the worst thing ever. And it's in the book about changing that's just a perception. It's not a reality. It's about ask yourself this question. We ask the wrong question. And this is a trick, the question like, is my drinking bad enough? Because we can always find 50 people whose drinking is far worse than ours, usually, unless we are literally drinking around the clock and on the streets. But we can always find someone who's drinking, and then we're like, oh, it's not that bad, so I'm okay. It's the wrong question. The question is this life good enough for you right now? Is this good enough?
Love that.
Is this good enough? And I think the answer is clearly it's not. So that's square one. Is this good enough for me? No, it's not good enough for you. If you have children, would this be good enough for your children? Absolutely not. So it's square one. Often we have to just be on square one and accept it. And then square two would be will appear. And then it's, well, what can I do about that? What help is there available? And there's tons of help available. There's tons of stuff that's free, that's low cost. I mean, there's lots and lots of options. And so take a step forward into that. What is there? Can I listen to podcasts? Can I buy a book? Is there an online program? Is there an in-person meeting? What is there? And to start there. And I always tell people, just give yourself a year. Like, it's not, however old you are, let's say you're 45. Let's hope you live till you're 90. You've still got 45 years of drinking ahead of you. Alcohol's not going anywhere. So just give yourself a year to go through all of the things, Christmas, July 4th, birthdays, summer, all of that kind of stuff. Do join a community. Do get as much help as you can. And if a year from now your life is not better or improved, you can go back to how it was. It's absolutely fine. You can do that.
I love that. I love that. And by the way, for our United States listeners, when she said process, that means process in Chicagoan.
Process.
I love it. I love it.
Five pillars.
I always forget that when that process. Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about how people can plug into Veronica Valli. Tell me all the different avenues and how they can reach you online, offline.
Well, so I have a podcast called the Soberful Podcast that I do with Chip. Summers used to be my boss. He's about 36 years sober. Soberful.com is my website, and the book is available everywhere that you buy books. You can get them on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and bookstores. And I have a Facebook group that's free as well called the Soberful Facebook group.
A lot of value. There's a lot of value in that Facebook group. I've been on there for about 2 months now.
Thanks, Glenn.
A lot of connection. And on Instagram and right?
Oh, yeah, Instagram is Veronica J. Valli. I've just started doing TikTok. I mean, I'm just trying to figure. I've been reading my book out and doing stuff. Yeah, I know. It's like sometimes it's too much.
TikTok, so.
Yeah, if you need something funny to do, Glenn and I are gonna. Should we have a TikTok tab on our website, Glenn?
I don't think so.
I don't think I'm ready for that. But speaking of our website, you can get to Veronica's social media links. We're going to post them on. They're posted already when you hear this, and a link to her book. Let me just close by reading the words of Kate Bailey. And Kate Bailey wrote a recommendation in the book, and I think she does a better job of summarizing it than I do. And she simply says, "Soberful is a great roadmap from a sober legend who knows the pitfall and the joy of the sober path, which gently and expertly guides you through the transition of early sobriety to a place of happy and sustainable sobriety. This book is going to help so many people and embrace a sober life and full life." She says the words eloquently, and then before we wrap up here, vegetarians, Glenn tells me he's not going to eat meat today, and I think, well, giddy up, he's made a choice. Is that not where we want to see sobriety get? It's a life choice. It doesn't need to be a death sentence sobriety. It's a life choice to something that, as your book title says, is a sustainable and fulfilling life, right?
Yeah, that's my hope, and that's what I want to do for my kids. I want us to be in a place where not drinking is a thing, and nobody, like if you were a vegetarian 40 years ago, people would look at you like, okay, that's a bit like out there, and you weren't catered for. Like maybe you'd get an omelette somewhere if you were lucky. Now I can go anywhere and be gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free, vegan. Nobody bats an eyelid, and I'm catered pretty much everywhere. You don't show up somewhere on a Friday night and go, I'm gluten-free, doesn't agree with me. And someone goes, oh, go on, have a bread roll. It's just Friday. Nobody does that, right? Have a breadstick. It'll make your Friday better. So whereas with alcohol, people are like, yeah, but you can just have one. Or go on, it's the weekend or whatever. So I want us to get to a place where being alcohol-free, and I think we can get there. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think we can get there, is people get it, that it's nobody's missing out, that it's a lifestyle choice. It doesn't agree with a lot of people. It's that's kind of, I like to be obnoxious about this, and I use this hashtag a lot. We are having more fun than you are. And it's this whole kind of like, don't think like I'm missing out on anything. Jeez, like you're the ones that are missing out, but please carry on. Carry on if you think that alcohol's bringing you everything you want. Sobriety's bringing me everything I want, and I don't pay the price that you pay. So I think we can get there, and I want to do that for my kids.
I love it. I had more fun than you today, by the way.
I love it. I love it.
Hey, will you come back?
I'd love to.
Thanks, Veronica. Yeah, I love the book. It's a roadmap to joy is how I put it.
Oh, thank you. You guys are so sweet.
Love it. You guys have a great day. We'll see you around the coffee shop.
Thanks, Veronica. Thanks, Mikey.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.